following announcement has been paid for by the Celtic World Order.
Hello and welcome back to Celtic World Order podcast. I'm always Steve O'Matt in the hat, and I thought tonight we'd have a wee chat because it is silly season, and we Celtic fans know that silly season, the transfer window this summer, it means a couple of things are very much predictable and you can hang your hat on them. The first is going to be that every single player that we've got of worth is going to be linked with a move away. They're all going to be leaving Celtic. They're all going to be jumping ship if you believe the red tops and all that rumour nonsense online. The second one, and it's like clockwork, is that we will be linked with every former player and their granny to now the end of the transfer window. It's just the way it goes. And as chance would happen, of course, there's been many former players' names that have popped up. Now, I thought, why not? Let's just address it. Do I think that there's any merit in it? Do I actually believe that we would approach some of these people? Do I even think that they would come back? And more importantly, do I think it would be worth it? So let's have a wee look at some of them. We'll go through it and we'll have a wee quick chat about it, because whether it's going to happen or not, it's out there and it can't stop people talking about it. So anyway, before we crack on, welcome again back to the channel. Want to thank every single one of the people who have taken the time to subscribe to the channel for your support. We recently hit a wee milestone for the channel, our first 500 subscribers, which I know is small scale. It's chump change to some of the bigger boys out there, but for a channel that's only been around for just over 8 weeks, we are very happy with that, and that is simply down to everybody taking the time to watch these videos. So if you are new, welcome here. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button. If you like what you see in here, give it a wee thumbs up. If you want to help the channel out more, share our content. It just gets the fabled algorithm going. It helps the reach extend, and it will grow this community, which is thriving. It is great to see so many people interacting and getting involved with the content. If you want to connect with us elsewhere, you can find us on X at CWPod1888. And last but not least, we have an old school Facebook at Celtic World Order Podcast. So you can reach out to us there. But the most important one would be to subscribe, because every time we put out any content, you will get notified. So, as I said at the top of the show, as we opened up, former players. Should we just leave it go? Should we just call it a day? It was nice while it lasted. Thank you for some sort of merit in having a look at them. Well, as it says there, this is what it's going to be about. Would looking to the past damage Celtic's future? We always talk about wanting to move forward as a club. We always talk about wanting to go to the next level. And it's often seen as when you revert back and you bring someone back for the past, that is a step back. Trying to rack my brains here thinking, but actually have a little think back to players who have returned. The second time's not quite as good as the first, is it? If we are being completely honest, probably names that would come to mind would be the likes of Sean Maloney. Came back, didn't quite happen. Of course, we've seen Izagiri as well. He was brought back when we were desperate, and it was just all right, wasn't it? And even if we look at loan players, there's, of course, Paddy Roberts. I'm quite surprised he's a name that's not been thrown into this hat so far at the summer, because Paddy Roberts' name always pops up. But he was another person. Remember, we brought him back, PR7, and it was less CR7 and more CR Smith. It was tragic, to say the least. So, who are the names? Who are the names that are getting thrown about like confetti? It'll come as no surprise. If you looked at the thumbnail, you'll know who we're going to talk about. The first one, I just want to get it right out of the way, and you'll say, well, why are you mentioning it, Steve-O? Because it has came up. And I think it's came up, but folk don't actually know the lay of the land with this one, and that is Christopher Ajer. Christopher Ajer is apparently come back to Celtic. Well, I'm sorry. Hate to burst your bubble. Christopher Ajer is not coming back to Celtic because he recently signed a new contract at Brentford to 2028. There is absolutely no chance Christopher Ajer has come back to Celtic. Sorry to burst your bubble, but if you're interested in what Christopher Ajer's been doing, well, yes, he's with Brentford and he's had 69 appearances for them. He's had 28 appearances this season, and then previous seasons, he had 9, 22 to 23. It wasn't a great season for him. And when he originally left, 21 to 22, he had 24 appearances. But as I says, let's just wash that one straight away. Christopher Ajer will not be coming back to Celtic. No matter how much money we've got, it's simply not happening. So let's look at some of the other names. The possibly, would you say, more realistic ones. The first one I want to talk about, let's just get it straight out there, is Kieran Tierney. Kieran Tierney's name pops up time and time again. And even in the January, before he went to Sociedad during the summer, we thought Brendan Rodgers might get him in a wee loan. That'd be a great one to get. Well, is it possible? Of course it's possible. We've got the finances, as we says. Let's not be accountants again, but if we just look at the basics, we are sitting on circa around about 55 to 60 million pounds in the bank. That was at the last reporting. Obviously, with running costs and day-to-day, that'll be slightly depreciated a wee bit. That might be down to about that 50 million mark. But then we know we are straight into the Champions League, the 8-match European super group that it is now, and that will come with riches upwards of 60 million pounds. Of course, there's another team in Scotland who could qualify for it. Personally, I don't think they will. And if they were to fail to do that, then that would increase that because we get a higher cut of the revenue for the Scottish allocation, TV, etc. That would boost it. And that's before you even think about getting points. If you were to get points in there, I think a win is roughly about £1.5 million it can be worth to you. And a draw circa about £700,000-800,000 there as well. Then you've got your tickets for that. You're going to have a 4-match package. That's going to be a nice wedge in there. You're also going to get your money that we've got from winning the Scottish Cup and from the league. That's about £4 million straight into the bank. Then we're going to have shirts, of course. We've seen the new ones just come out. There's going to be another 4 or 5 shirts and all those merchandise. And then you've got your season ticket money. So we're going to find ourselves in the upper echelons of that sort of swirling about maybe about £120 million income at our disposal. Of course, having money is a great thing, but you've got to use it wisely. So we come back to Tierney. His contract's up in 2026, but he is very much out of favour at Arsenal. Bit of a strange one, if we're being honest. If you look at him, 27 years of age, he's had 124 appearances during his time at Arsenal. And if we look back through those seasons, in his first season when he left in 19 to 20 season, 24 appearances, then quite steady. The following season was 38, then 25 in the 21 to 22 season, and 22 to 23, it was 36. One thing I would say is, and we all know this, is Kieran Tierney has had his issues with injury. He's sort of unfortunately been plagued with fairly regular injuries. Some have kept him out for longer periods than others, but when you actually look at that, breaking it down by season, he has played the bulk in most games in a season. So the injury problem might not be quite as bad as we actually think, or certainly as we perceive it. But he's completely fallen out of favour with Arteta at Arsenal, and he obviously had to go to Real Sociedad in La Liga, where he's made 26 appearances this season, 2 outs in the Champions League, and then, of course, we know he got injured on 2 occasions. One was slightly a bit longer, the other was a slightly shorter one. So he's valued on paper, because it is on paper, at around about 10 million. That's roughly what Arsenal seem to value him at. With 2 years left on his contract, you've got to say he would possibly command a big wage, and also a signing fee, of course, and a transfer fee. Now, I am not going to sit here and say that is unattainable. I watch a lot of content as well as creating content for this channel. I also watch a lot of other stuff, and I've seen a lot of different podcasters or people writing for articles online who have essentially said that they think the Kieran Tierney thing is completely pie in the sky and it's unobtainable. Well, I would have to kick back in that and say, based on what? If you simply base it on wages and say he's on, I don't know, 80 grand, 90 grand, then yeah, of course, Celtic aren't going to pay that. Get that firmly in the bin. If we are talking about the fee, now, in an ideal world, yes, Arsenal maybe value him at that 10 million. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get that, particularly if he is a high earner and they want him offered wages. Now, there was interest from elsewhere. There was apparently interest from the likes of Newcastle and stuff, but as we've saw with certain teams down south, there's a lot of teams, your Villas, you've got Newcastle are in there as well, you've got Leicester. There's about 4 or 5 teams who have essentially been told that they will have to sell players before they can even think of buying players. So that really funnels down and that narrows the scope for an English move for the likes of Kieran Tierney. Because if we're being completely honest, he's not going to get a move to one of those bigger teams. He's not going to go to Man United. He's not going to go to Man City. He's probably not even going to go to the likes of a Spurs. So it really funnels it down, but it's sort of middle to lower, if at all, in the English Premier League. Again, that is just my opinion. Real Sociedad, yes, they were flying high. Yes, they're in La Liga. It's a nice, sexy league, good weather and all that. And also, we're in the Champions League. But it's Real Sociedad. Again, that's appealing to a player because they can give you a certain wage, a certain lifestyle, and you play in a certain quality of league. But it's not exactly a team that is massively exciting, is it? If you really, really think about it, is it a step up from Arsenal? Probably not. Now, 27 years of age, he will have many suitors, I'm sure, and he will have many options. It all comes down to what those options are and how much Arsenal want rid of him. Yes, they could play complete hardball and hold out for that 10 million or more if they were fortunate enough to get people involved. However, if they don't, it's not just a case of pushing the player and saying, you will go there. So let's look at transfer fee. Could Celtic realistically push out the boat to buy Tierney? In my opinion, absolutely. In terms of the wage, could we give him that wage? No, we wouldn't. We could, but we wouldn't. And it would not make good business sense for us to smash the bank and start getting into those ridiculous wage brackets. It's just not going to happen. But we can offset the wage by signing on. So if you give a player a nice wedge of money at the front end, that offsets. So could you bring him in for that? 40 grand? Yep, absolutely. You could. Would he take it? It's another story. That remains to be seen. There's obviously going to be a fondness there. There's going to be a very, firm connection and a love for the club eternally as a fan that might just get him on board with that. When it came round to loaning him out, I mentioned this previously, I spoke about it, and I was really concerned about the injury, and I sort of said to myself, no, I would rather go and spend, 4, 5, 6 million on a top quality left back that's new, that's fresh, that maybe hasn't had the Tierney-related injury problems, and do that rather than go to Tierney. So I'm very much on the fence with the Kieran Tierney situation. If it was something that was possible, whether that was on a loan for one season with a reduced rate for the second season, obligation to Byfield to take him on, with Arsenal, obviously, of course, paying a good proportion of his wages, then certainly I think it's something that I would like to explore. I would slightly be concerned about the injury, but again, we've looked through his numbers, and by all accounts, he's played quite a lot of football, so it's not as bad as perhaps we think. But again, you've got to ask yourself, coming up to Scotland, now I'm not saying that we've got a Neanderthals game, but it's certainly a very intense, it's a very hard-hitting game. The chances of getting injured are going to be probably much higher than they would be in the English League or certainly in La Liga, and we've seen he's had injuries there. So that would be something that certainly, if it was going to ever get explored, that you would have to go through with a fine-tooth comb in those medicals to make sure that you're not getting stung. Tierney, in summary, If it's an option, you've obviously got to look at the Brendan Rodgers factor. It's certainly someone that he valued. They had a great relationship, was a great player under Rodgers, and that might just be a situation where, similar to what happened with Sociedad, he is not finding himself a club as readily or as quickly as they perhaps wanted, and that's maybe where Celtic could come and sweep in and try and work something. So for me, is it possible? Yes, it is, but it would need to be a perfect aligning of circumstances. And again, when you look at that potential wage bracket, when you look at that potential price, even if you're talking 6 to 7 million, if you were getting a bargain, it's still a lot of money for a left back. And I'm pretty sure, in my opinion, there would probably be better options out there that would be worth exploring. But that one, I would not turn my nose up at it if it was certainly worth having a discussion about. So, who's the other one? Well, it's Stuart Armstrong, isn't it? What's your thoughts on that? People say it's lazy. People say he's past it. People say he's done. For me, when I look at the squad that we've got, would I rather have Stuart Armstrong as one of my midfielders on paper than Kwon? Yes. Would I rather have Armstrong sitting on my bench or not on my bench because he's not there than McCarthy? Absolutely. Yes, I would. Now you might be saying, Steve, well, that's not really setting the bar high, is it? But let's look at the positives. So Armstrong, Southampton, 32 years of age. Yes, he's getting on. I know that. But you've only got to look at Aaron Moy and look at the Aaron Moy effect there. Similarly, we scoffed at Aaron Moy, but he came in, was a consummate professional. Yes, he maybe took a wee bit of time to bed in, but that was because he wasn't really playing a lot of football. And then, let's be honest, he was instrumental. He was a massive player for Celtic, and we've not quite replaced that. Now, I know we talk about sizing up, levelling up, and looking towards the Champions League and really pushing on and going in a new direction. Absolutely. But as I've said time and time again on this podcast, there is a place for experience and a running bill. Somebody that's just costing you wages, that's there. They're a means to an end. You get a season or two out of them and you say thank you because they've done a job for what they are. Now, look at him here. He's 214 appearances for Southampton since he left ourselves. He's been an absolute mainstay for them, and I'm actually quite surprised that he didn't get kept on with them now getting promoted back up to the Premier League. This season alone, he played 42 games. 42 games. That shows you how important he was, even at 32, for a team in the Championship, which is a very highly competitive league, arguably one of the hardest leagues to get out of. And he played his part. So I'm very, very surprised that they didn't at least give him a 1-year contract to keep him around. That's why, for me, I think you've got a guy there. He's been playing a lot of football. He's still in peak condition. He's got a vast amount of experience. He knows the club. Well, he does know the club. He knows the manager. The manager got the best out of Stuart Armstrong. He converted him during his time at Celtic, and ultimately that led to him getting that move and being a mainstay in the Premier League, in the Championship for Southampton. Top of that as well, he's a very hard-working player, very industrious, maybe not down and dirty with the tackling, but he's certainly got a great eye for a pass, and he can also chip in with goals. 25 goals in his career at Southampton is not to be sniffed at. There's also other benefits. He's a free agent, so you are just getting him on wages. And, of course, there's the other one, the Scottish quota. Now, I know that shouldn't be a reason to sign a person, but if you look at that and say, well, we've got a plethora of absolute nonsense midfield-wise that we should be looking to ship out. If you can bring in somebody like Armstrong on reasonable to lowish wages and get 2 seasons out of him, I think that would be perfect. 32 isn't exactly over the hill. Look at the likes of Scott Brown, for example, and the longevity that we got out of him. So there is a place for him. And again, the aforementioned Aaron Moy. Is it going to set the hair on fire? Is it going to be this massive, massive improvement? No, it isn't. But again, there's a place for these guys. I would rather have, as I say, Armstrong cutting about in our squad than I would have Kwon. I would rather go and give him wages than give wages to Kwon. So for me, I think it's personally a no-brainer. What could be the stumbling blocks there? Well, firstly, he might just want to retire. Now, I know at 32, I've just said he's got plenty of years left in his legs if he so desires to do. He never looks like a guy that's been slowing down. He never looks like a guy that's breaking down or missing a beat or looking like he's getting over the hill. So I think he's perfect. But as we've known previously, he's a very clever, he's a very intelligent guy. He's got a degree. He's got his eyes on the prize for retirement. He might be looking at, I've played top level football for X amount of years now. I have made a pretty packet in terms of wages and I'm pretty much set for life. Now's the time for me to transition into these other ventures. And he might want to do that because he has mentioned, previously that football is essentially a means to an end for him. Is he super passionate about it? He's been honest and says, no, I love playing football, but does it consume me? Does it define me? No, it doesn't. So he might want to just settle down and wander off into the sunset. But if there again is a option to have that sit down, to have that chat, to bring him in for that experience as that alternative option, because a guy like Armstrong, I don't think he's going to be signing for Celtic and wanting to go straight into the first team. He's not. But he'll know where his bread's buttered. And if you can give him a reasonable wage to see him out, probably moving back up to Scotland, where he's from, be around family, settling down with a view of making those steps into his retirement, then I think, there's worse options that you could have. So if Armstrong is one, I would definitely, again, it's not saying for squad filler, padding it out with nonsense, because I don't think he ticks that box. Yes, he would be a squad player, but he would be a quality alternative option. Again, would he be a stopgap? Yep, sure he would be, but I think you could get a good 2 years out of him. And if you get that on lower wages whilst releasing some of the nonsense or moving on or getting rid of some of the nonsense in midfield, I would rather have him sitting as an option than what some of we already have in place. Third one, it's French Eddie. It's been kicking about. Folk have been mentioning it. French Eddie, is he one that you'd go back to? I know there was a lot of sort of ill feeling, if you will, around about when he left Celtic. People had this notion that he downed tools and that he couldn't be bothered. I think, if we look at that season, that was a tragic season for everybody involved. I think there was bigger issues than Eddie. And even when you look at him that season, I think he scored around about 20 goals. Not bad for a guy that was down in tools against a backdrop of complete and utter disaster. Moved to Palace, as we know, in the 2021 season. Since then, he's played 101 games for Palace, and he scored a very meagre 21 goals. 7 he got this season. Season before that was 5, and then previous to that, it was only 6. This is in the league, of course. That's not great numbers. People say that he was maybe a failed player for levelling up. But then I suppose you've got to look at circumstance. He went to Crystal Palace, and without disrespecting Crystal Palace as a club, they are a peripheral club in the English League. They might be based in London, but they're certainly one of the smaller London sides. And in terms of the overall quality, they're always going to be fighting. They're always going to be swimming against the tide. It's always going to be an uphill struggle. So unless you are this mercurial talent that is unbelievable, that just happens to be at a small club and smash it, that's not a bad return. And we've got to look at other strikers that play in the Premier League or play in the Championship. I will use, for example, just for a laugh, your Ollie Burks. Guys like that. Or Ollie McBurney as well. Guys like this who were playing in England and scoring 5 goals or something in 2 seasons, but they kept playing them. And that's the kind of strange thing about the English League. You can go down there and you can just be a player that gets played, and it's different. When you're at Celtic, if you're a striker, you're expected to hit 20 plus every single season. But when you're down in England, particularly when you're playing at one of these sort of peripheral teams, they don't expect you to hit those kind of numbers because their strikers don't hit those kind of numbers. So in terms of saying is he a failed move, a failed experiment at Crystal Palace, probably unfair. Now, the interesting thing about the Edouard situation is that his contract expires in 2025, next year in June. And the manager who's came in and essentially says, you can move on. You're not going to be part of my long-term plans. So in terms of his market value, what do Palace want from him? Well, depending on what you read, they are happy to entertain anywhere from 10 million up to 15 million. Now, the question is, would they get that? Now, we see players move from club to club down there, and 15 million, 20 million with poor records in terms of goals or whatever it may well be, depending on the position, and that just happens to be the norm. At 26 years of age, he's not even entered these prime years, and there's a lot of scope there for him. But he also could be a guy that you've never really looked and saw any raging rumours that other clubs down south are interested in him. You've not even seen any rumours of clubs abroad being interested in him. And also, when we look at the price and the value and the nature of the English League versus our own league, teams like that can write off a guy that they bought for 15 million. See, as long as they can claw back as much of that money as possible, if they get half it back, sometimes they're just happy with that. Even if they get less of that. If he's just a guy that's weighing down their books and they want him away, then that makes it possible. In terms of Edouard, as I say, could we get him in the door? Absolutely, we could get him in the door. Let's not forget that we signed him for 9 million from PSG based on a couple of subs appearances. Didn't look fantastic. I think he scored about 7 goals. Of course, he then went on and really made his name for us. And he maybe ended up at Palace by design. I think with the COVID and all the shutdown and all the nonsense that happened, if you remember, he was getting linked with far more attractive clubs. He was getting, his name was getting bandied around some top clubs in Europe. And then, of course, the dreaded COVID hit. Everything shut down, and it really just put everything, moves, football on the back burner. And it really did stifle his, stunted his development, it stunted his chances, where he ended up being at Palace, and that was the best he was getting offered. There wasn't very much else offered there. He's bent down there. He's tried to make itself work. It's not been for the will of trying. He scored some good goals this season, but 7, it's a no bad return. Does that make him massively sellable to another club down there? I am not so sure. So again, for me, it all comes down to the value. Again, we talk about those wages. He'll be on incredibly lofty wages. Of course he will, 100%. But as I said previously, when we were talking about the Tierney situation, these guys can be offset on their wage by giving them a wedge up front. And Celtic could more than likely do that. Now, of course, this begs into the question of, we've been looking at Adam Ida, and he's certainly the one that, after his massive contribution this season, that fans really want to get on board. I am one that says that I would sign him. Certainly I would sign him at the original talking of 6 million. Now that we're starting to go up to potentially 9 or 10 million, would I want to sign him for that? It's a difficult question to ask. It's not disregarding what he had done, but if you ask me, right, you can sign Edouard for 9 million, 10 million, or you can sign Adam Ida for 9 or 10 million, that is a massive question. If I'm being honest, if it was a straight shootout at that price range, I would probably go for Edouard. Now, folk might roll their eyes at that. Folk might say, you'd never go back to an ex. But I think that was just by design. That downing tools and that apparent terrible season where he scores 20 goals, I think that was just a team that had ran their course. I think there was maybe allowances, or there was maybe promises made that weren't met, that couldn't be met because of the circumstances, and some players became a wee bit disenchanted with the whole thing. He had some of his best times at Celtic under Brendan Rodgers, and this is where we need to bring in the Brendan Rodgers factor. If he was to have a conversation, if he thought he could get a sit down with Edouard and he got a sniff that he could sign him, I genuinely think he would lean more towards Edouard than he would Adam Ida. Edouard, he has now got some Premier League experience under his belt, albeit, as I say, has it been fantastic? Well, no, it hasn't, but he's played at that higher level, and he's played more often at that higher level than Adam Ida. Also, as well, at 26, he's a wee bit older, and he's also far more rounded as a player. If you could get an Edouard buying in to Rodgers Part 2 and want to come up here, then I think absolutely you should go for him. And the thing as well is, I would definitely say that if he came back up and he were to be a success, those moves that he wanted previously, I think he would certainly put himself back in the frame for if he came back to us and was firing like he was previously. And you would definitely make your money back on him. Maybe sometimes it's the player himself that needs to take a step back to go forward. Now, people always say, never use Celtic as a stepping stone. We're not Stepping Stone FC. We are not here to facilitate a player's next move. And I'm not saying that Brendan Rodgers or the club would be marketing to him of that. But at the same time, that's a wee carrot to dangle to say, remember when things were good, remember previous to all that nonsense, the teams you were getting linked with, you found yourself at a club like that by design. You come back to us, you do what you can do, and I guarantee you, or you can expect that within 2 seasons, those teams are going to be coming calling again. You need to build yourself back up to move on. And if you can come and you can help us out whilst doing that, then both parties win. So Edouard, for me, is it doable? Of course it's doable. Every single name that I'm talking about, bar Ayer for obvious reasons, but even then, if you wanted to buy him, you probably could. Everyone is doable. It's just about the numbers and making it value for money. Of course, we could go out and sign players at this price. We could even pay more in wages if we want, but we do have our caps. So for me, Edouard, if it's something that you could explore, absolutely. And I'll even throw it out here as well. Take him on a season loan with an obligation to buy in June 2025. Offer a good, healthy chunk of his wages to Palace, take him on, and then say, we'll buy him next year. And again, that would help potentially bring down the fee if that was something that you really wanted to do. But so far, he is one that I would 100% definitely look at. If it was something that was potentially possible, I would look at it, and I think Brendan Rodgers would look at it, and I think he would be all over it. So, last but not least, and it is the laziest of all, the laziest of lazy, we know we need a goalkeeper, don't we? Joe Hart, he's departed, he's left a big hole in that squad, and the names came around, and I just kind of go, oh no, here we go again. It's Fraser Forster. I really don't know what to say about that one. Is it something that could happen? Well, of course it could happen. Anything can happen with Celtic. You know, sometimes when you don't expect it, it just happens. It would be the most Celtic thing in the world to go back to Fraser Forster. I think this would be his third or fourth time back at the club. As madness as that is. Now, just look at the optics on it. He's 36. Joe Hart is just leaving. It is not an upgrade. It is not. You're basically bringing in something that's older, the same age. He went down to Spurs for that big wedge. He went for that bag, and he's only played 21 games since he done that. And he's only played once the previous season there, which was a cup game. Crazy, isn't it? Now, we all know that goalkeepers can go longer. Goalkeepers can go until they're 38, 39, maybe 40 in some cases. I don't know enough about Forster. I've not seen him lately. Apparently, he's only played one game. Of course, we've not seen him. Would I bring Forster back? Honestly, I would not want to. But I could see why Celtic being Celtic and cheaping out would. He always looked very fit. He always looked very sharp. And he looks after himself. So yeah, there is that wee argument that you could get 2 years out of him on cheap wages. Again, after being, Postecoglou's Tottenham willing to set him free into the wild, realistically, where is he going to go? Where is he going to get a contract again? I'm sure there'd be someone down there in England. But realistically, if he's talking about game time, he's probably going to have to drop down, isn't he? He's going to drop down the leagues. He's not going to get a position in a Premier League team, and he's certainly maybe in the Championship. He'd maybe get a game, but again, maybe not one of the top end competing Championship teams. You're probably looking mid-Championship, and even, dare I say it, League One. So it would be lazy for me. It would be extremely lazy to look at Forster. I think I've made it no secret what my thoughts on the goalkeeping position are. I always think that we should be looking at guys, not necessarily in Forster's age bracket, but we should be looking to guys in the sort of mould of Forster and Hart, vastly experienced, that are maybe sitting about that 34, 33 sort of age bracket, that are sitting at a big club with vast experience, where you can just bring them in on wages and, as I say, treat them as a running bill, where if you get 2, maybe maximum 3 seasons out of them, then that's what pays you back. You move on, and then you repeat and you refresh. Why am I of that attitude? Well, I've said this time and time again. If you think of other than Forster, other than Boric, we've never actually had to go out and replace a goalkeeper as such. We've never, oh my God, we've sold our goalkeeper, what do we do now? We've never really had that issue. We've always had somebody come in, or we've brought somebody up as a number 2 or whatever. So we've never had the issue of selling a goalkeeper to bring one in. And as we know, as we're seeing with guys like Matt Riley and Jota and everybody who went before them, the lifespan of a top player at Celtic tends to be about 2 seasons, thereabouts. And yes, I get the idea, if you go out and you spend £5-6 million on a goalkeeper and they perform fantastically, that you can sell them on and you can make a profit, and then you repeat and you start again. Absolutely, I do get that. And I wouldn't be against that idea. We've done it with Barkas. I know we should never use Barkas as a measuring stick for anything, but he ticked off all the boxes, and then we brought him in. It just didn't quite work. It was pretty poor. It was, it was a failed experiment. But I just kind of like the idea of bringing in somebody that has vast experience, not just the number 1 for their team they have been for a season or season and a half or something like that. I'm talking about somebody with vast depth of experience that you can bring in, that can also bring in other elements whereby they can be a leader, they can be a role model, things like that. I always like that. And as I says, you would have that player. If you bring in a guy that's 33 or thereabouts, you will get your 3 years out of them. It's highly, highly unlikely that clubs are going to come and try and snatch away that guy at that age and offer you big money for them. It's just probably not going to happen. So it gives you a wee bit more stability potentially, I think, when you've got that kind of idea. And I think that you can get a good goalkeeper by not spending a lot of money, by doing exactly what I'm suggesting, because I would rather we went for that tact at the back in the goalkeeping position and spent the money elsewhere on defenders, an attacker, which to me, those are areas that you have to spend money on to get real quality. You actually have to go and spend money. With goalkeepers, as I've said, because there's most big clubs, their second and third choice goalkeepers are fantastic usually. They're the guys that you can prize away, and that's where you can move the pieces about, save a wee bit of money. Not being tight, but you can save a bit of money and you can be more sensible in these positions. We've done it before. We'd obviously Craig Gordon, Joe Hart, as we just saw. Obviously, when we brought Forster back, yeah, it was a loan, but there's another example of a guy that was out of favour that you can get in quality and they can be a means to an end for you, and they're going to bring something to the table. As for Forster, no. I know he ticks off all these boxes, and as I says, I don't know enough about him. I think in my head, I look at him and I think, yeah, he could play his 38. But again, 36 for me is just, I would want my goalkeeper. I'd have a goalkeeper that was 36 and I was getting 1 season out of them because I brought him at 33 and I was expecting to get 3 years out of them. Yeah, I would play with that. But when you've had a guy who's 36 that's been sitting on the bench and he's played 1 game this season and he's been let go, I think, yeah, time's up there. That's one not to go back to. He's had so many chances at Celtic as well. That would slightly put me off, where he was never really truly committing. He had the chances to come back, but then he decided to walk away. Understandably, it's a short career. You've got to make that bag. But for me, that would be the sticky part with him. You've had your chances. You've had multiple chances. Why should we come back and be that crutch that you can always depend on if you need a move? So those were the names, as I said, very much split. Armstrong is a yes for me in terms of someone that you could get 2 good years out of, similar to Moy. I'm using Moy as the example there. And again, that's basing on getting rid of some rubbish as well. Is he the solution? No, but he's a good option. Tierney, as I says, that's another one that's all about that money. That's very lofty. But again, he's another one that he knows he's not going to be in the picture. He's one, again, similar to I says with Edouard, I would be open to exploring for a season-long loan with an option to buy at a reduced rate the second season over. Edouard, he would be up his contract. As I say, if you were to get him on such a deal, he would be out of contract. So that would, if you gave them a decent amount of money at the end of that period, whilst covering a good bulk of his wages this coming season, that could make it workable. Same with Tierney, 2 years left in his contract, but he's very much out the picture. If you could get him on loan at Celtic, bring him in, and then you're signing him potentially when he's got 1 year left in his contract. Again, this is the kind of smart business that Celtic need to be looking at. Yes, going back, as we say, can it damage your future? We should be looking at forward, we should be looking at exciting, vibrant, new players in these positions. Of course we could, but there's no doubt of the quality that those 3 guys there that we could offer. And I think as well, it's always about coming back and who your manager is and what the ethos is and what you are trying to be sold. Brendan Rodgers bringing a player back, I would trust far more than, and I don't mean to talk him down, than say Neil Lennon bringing a guy back. You know, I'd invest fully in Rodgers to get the most out of them. I know I said at the top of the show, I mentioned Paddy Roberts. He came back under Rodgers and didn't quite work, but that was also injury hit season, because he did have good flashes in it. It didn't work out him simply through a lot of injury. But if you can get these guys back, you can keep them fit, and you can get them firing, and you can get them bought in. And if you can get them sold, as I'm sure if they had the conversation with Brendan Rodgers, he'd be more than capable of selling them that dream. Then for me, absolutely, it's ones to start talking about, ones to consider. But we need to also be looking at the other options, because yes, everybody has a sort of wee soft spot for these previous heroes, if you will, and want to bring them back. We don't want to be short-sighted. I'm only bringing this up, I'm only doing this video because people have been talking about them. I'm not necessarily saying that we are definitely looking at them. We might not be. It could all just be silly season chat, as we know. But as I say, as if they're an option, definitely I'd look at them. But I want us to push on. It looks as if the Bernardo deal is going to be happening. Again, smart business from Celtic. It was originally meant to be around about 6 million. Well, they're now talking that that's going to be reduced down to about 4 million. Likewise, as I say, with Armstrong, Bernardo is that exciting, vibrant young player that you're going to develop, you're going to get something new out of. But supplement it with the likes of an Armstrong. And as I say, it's always about getting in the top quality players, getting in the right player for Celtic that are going to meet the criteria, meet our needs, that are going to give us better depth and give us options. As I've said time and time again, when it comes to transfers, if we're needing to bring in maybe up to 8 players, yes, we could, because we've got the money, but not every single one of those players, those 8 players, is going to be ultra top bracket. They're not always going to be like 5 million, 6 million, whatever. You've got to sort of supplement it. There's guys, as I say, places for the likes of Armstrong, a running bill. You know what you're going to get. You're going to get quality. You're going to get experience. He's going to give you a good option, and he's going to cost you low money. Yes, he maybe only get 2 years out of him, but it's still 2 years, and it's still 2 years better than 2 years of Quan, is it not? So for me, we need to look at these. Bernardo coming in, that would be a great start. Adam Ida as we say, that one's still, who knows there what's going to go on. Chat about it rising up in terms of the price. Would I pay up to 9 million for him? Yeah, I would. And I've used that based on, as I say, the Edouard. Look at how much we paid for Edouard with such a small return and an insignificant return on his goals, what he did in that period. Then we signed him versus an Adam Idah who has scored some massively vital goals and really, really contributed in a huge way to the success of this season. So if we could have done it then, we should be and could be and will and hopefully be doing it this season. If it was to open up a transfer window and I had Bernardo and Adam Idah in situ, I would be very happy with that as a start. But it is just a start, and we need to start looking to get those guys and the guys of quality in the positions that we require sooner rather than later. I'd like to hope that with the positivity that we're seeing for the manager, he seemed a wee bit rejuvenated. He seemed to speak a lot more confidently after Wall Jr. and his cronies disappeared. I don't know if he's maybe been given allowances. I say that time and time again as well. It seems as if he was sold something and didn't get it during the summer. We came full circle. We had those moans, those groans, those gripes for the manager. But then it seems as if there was a weight taken off his shoulders and he really kicked on. It was the Brendan of old. And I don't know. I would like to hope, it's all about that hope, isn't it? That he has been given some sort of assurances that he is going to be getting quality that he is looking for, that he's demanding. And as I say, Idah and Bernardo are a good start. The guys that I've spoken about here, if we are looking at old players, then there's worse ones that we could be talking about than those, is there not? Definitely an option. Anyway, listen, that is all for now. We'll be back again with a couple other videos that are going to be coming out as well. So keep your eyes peeled, as I say. Make sure you get subscribed up for those, and those will be coming out in due course. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you for joining us. And whatever you're doing with yourself, we'll see you back here at some point. But until then, take care of yourselves. And as always, hail, hail. See you all later.